Agora sim. Olá, boa tarde, obrigada antes de mais. E aqui apenas um alerta, nós iremos conversar em inglês e, portanto, se precisarem, há dispositivos disponíveis para que possam acompanhar devidamente a conversa. Antes de mais, então, muito obrigada e obrigada à organização do FÓLIO por mais uma vez me terem convidado para estar aqui hoje e, sobretudo, tão bem acompanhada. It's a true pleasure to be here today for this conversation with these three wonderful writers. You gotta read them because their books are really very, very good. Each in their own way work with words to question, rescue, reconstruct maybe our way of life. Today we will be talking about memory, that unstable and fascinating substance that makes us who we are and shapes our personal and collective narratives, and it's so often serve as a starting point for artistic and literary creation. So it's a pleasure to welcome you today here. I don't have an order, so I will go I will start presenting Marta Pérez Carbonell, author of the book Nada Mais Ilusório, editado pela Porto Editora, o livro está disponível. Marta, para além de professora, é também escritora. Depois, Luísa Sobral, que provavelmente dispensa apresentações, compositora, cantora, artista, plástica também, tive hoje a oportunidade de testemunhar, e também escritora. O livro também está disponível, Nem Todas as Árvores Morrem de Pé. And last but not the least, Joana, or Joana, as you can call her in both ways, Elmi, autora do livro Feitas de Culpa. Joana, para além de escritora, é também jornalista e penso que vamos ter aqui uma conversa, bem, no mínimo divertida, a avaliar pelas conversas que já tive com as três. Well, thank you so much for being with us today, and maybe I will start asking you, could memory be the most powerful but also the most dangerous material for a writer?
Shall I start?
Yes.
Here? Okay.
Yes, you first, Marta.
Okay. Could it be? I think it is definitely a dangerous tool if you think that that you can remember accurately and write from memory. I've always thought, even when I write about places that I have been to, and people say, "Oh, I can really tell that you lived in London, that you live in New York," because the book really reflects that. I think that's interesting because I feel like I'm making it up when I write more than remembering what I know of the place, and I think it's because a lot of memory has to do with invention and with the way that through time you have sort of reshaped the ideas that you had about a place and how they interacted with your new self since you were there. So I think memory serves me when I write, but mostly because I don't trust it. So it becomes a tool for imagination and for creativity more than something I accurately look at when I think about places or feelings or certain passages that I may have lived, but since then, who knows, right? I don't really remember them, and I feel like even when I think I do, I don't trust that memory very much.
Luísa.
Well, I think it's interesting because memories, they change with time. So today I'm going to remember something, and maybe in, 5 years, I'll remember it a different way because I'm a different person. So I think it's very interesting because the same thing that happened 20 years ago will be seen by me differently because I'm a different person every year. So I think that's very interesting, and that's why we shouldn't really trust memory, because it's the perspective that we have at that point in our lives about what happened before. And every time I don't write out of fiction, so I don't really use, of course we always use our memories and we use our experiences, but but I usually don't write about my own life. But even I have read a lot of about autofiction, and people say that a part of it is their memory, and a big part is just what they make up. I remember this author, Walter Uggemein, this Portuguese author, and the other day I was listening to his interview, and he was saying that he wrote this whole book about his childhood, and then his mom called him, and she said, "Those things didn't happen to you, they happened to your cousin." So the thing is, sometimes we shouldn't really trust ourselves, you know, because that happens. I know that sometimes I remember things and I don't know if I remember them because I saw a picture, because someone told me about that, or because a combination of both. So they are a dangerous tool, but they are unreliable. So, but that's maybe the fun part of it, is that they can be whatever we want it to be, even if it's about our cousin. If the story is interesting, why not make it ours? So I think that's the cool part of it, is that they can shift, and we can transform them, and no one's here to tell us if it happened or not, because if we say so, then it did happen, at least today.
Joanna?
What I would add to all of these wonderful remarks, and first of all, hi everyone, thank you for being here, thank you for listening to us talk about memory, is that memory in itself isn't dangerous. It's the reaction between memory and the world around it in the present that I find could be particularly, or pose some sort of danger. The reaction between personal and collective memory. For example, the memory of our nations, we are convinced that we're connected by a common, thread of history, or language, individual memory, how we remember our own past. And we see that all over the world right now, this very dangerous reaction between personal and collective memory, personal and national memory. I think this is where the danger really lies, how we use memory, what we choose to do with it. We are creatures who are connected by histories, personal, shared, and collective. And what we do with that connection, how we choose to build that, is where it can become very, very dangerous to remember. But the hope can also lie in remembering better, right? And I think that's what, literature does, is that it helps us remember, helps us go back with a little bit more empathy and a little bit more peace than how we tend to engage with, memory usually.
It's very interesting, because sometimes that collective memory and the individual memory can clash, and especially in your book, Joanna, that can happen very easily. We will talk about that in a minute, but it is a good starting point for the next question. 2 years ago, we interviewed Salman Rushdie, and he told in that interview that history don't usually talk about the defeated. Do you think that maybe that can be a good ground for the writers to fix memories and to make them last, the memories of the persons that were forgotten by the historians, by the history that is written officially? Do you feel that task? Because in a way, you three wrote a little bit about this in your books that are released here in Portugal. Do you feel that responsibility?
Yeah, I think it's true what they say, that history is written by the winning side, and that's the version we get. And connecting to what Joanna said, that's maybe something literature can do, right? Telling human stories, because a book that is fiction is not a history book, right? And it doesn't usually have numbers or statistics, but it has human stories and it has individual stories. And in those stories, you can, I think, give a voice. You're there, you're there as a puppet master, so you can give a voice to a person in the story that you feel like if this story were told objectively, he wouldn't get a voice, right? But I'm going to make that evident here and apparent, and I'm going to show that either he didn't get a voice and what happened as a result, or I'm actually going to give this person a voice, the biggest voice here, even though he wasn't meant to be the person writing the story, the person on the winning side or with the upper hand or, in a position of power. So, I think humbly, that's what I tried to do in my little story. There is someone who wouldn't have had a voice because someone else took his voice, but a story showed sort of what happened as a result.
Luisa, this is, I think, a question that tells a lot about your book, because you based your novel in a story that you heard from a real person.
Yeah.
So did you felt that responsibility of being fair to the person who lived that story, even though you already, of course, told us in several interviews that is fiction, of course, but your starting point was a real story of a real person. Do you feel that responsibility?
No, and I really couldn't, because for me it's really important that that is a starting point, an inspiration, and it's not based on that story. So that's a really important thing, because I wouldn't want to write about, especially because they died, so I couldn't really know a lot about their lives. Also because probably they wouldn't be as interesting as the one that I wrote. I don't know, sometimes real life is more interesting than fiction, but sometimes it isn't. So, because I wanted to write that story, like I wanted to write it, and I didn't want to have that pressure. I really wanted to make up my story. That was inspiring, and that was the beginning of it. The other day I went to present the book in Villarreal, that's where they are from. And this man told me, she would be really mad if she knew that you wrote about her. And I said, well, I didn't write about her, okay? I was inspired, and so it is just an inspiration. I wouldn't want to write about her life, because we didn't really have anything. The interesting thing about this couple was that they didn't tell anything about their lives to anyone prior to arriving to Portugal. So no one knew anything about their lives, and so I think they wanted to have this rebirth in Portugal. That's why they changed their names and all, because they wanted this to be the beginning. And that made me think, so what happened before that you want to hide so much? And so then I thought something very strong must have happened. So then I went from there. So I didn't know anything, and that kind of helped me, but I do not feel the pressure of writing about, I ended up writing about a period where there's no freedom. And it's true that that period echoes a lot in what we're living now in Europe and the world. And it is really important, going back to the memory subject, it is really important to remember these periods in history where there was no freedom. But I didn't feel that I had to do that. I was not like, okay, so now I have to write about not having freedom. No, I ended up there. It was an accident. But I'm glad I did. But I don't feel that. I never felt that in my music either. I did write about the war in Ukraine. I did write about Palestine, but all because I wanted to, and not because I felt that I had to, ever. Also because I think that if you do that, then it comes across as just you're telling people what to do, and so I don't do that with my art.
Well, I must confess, this morning I was talking to Joanna, and she confessed me that she's frightened because what she describes in her book is happening now. Again, let's just say again, especially in the United States. And the book was released in 2015, I believe?
No, it's set.
It's set
in
but it was
2015, released in 2021.
2021.
Yes.
And in a way, the book told us about, well, a regime that is very strict, very rigid. It talks about migration. It talks about migrants in the United States. Well, and it seems so accurate, and it seems like it was written yesterday. And in a way, you also used memory, your memories, and the people around you to write this book. And now you see that what you described, in a way, is happening right now. How does it feel that for you, and how you deal with the clash that you talked earlier, the clash that may occur between the collective memory and the individual memory?
I mean, it feels terrible. Nobody wants to write a book about dictatorship and oppression and immigration from that angle and have it still be relevant. It's bittersweet because literature does help us get into issues like that on a more deeper level, more human level, which is why I also agree with Lisa that a writer's job isn't to be an activist. And a writer's job isn't to be a historian. I leave the revision of history to historians, and I leave telling people how to approach issues to, politicians, activists, influencers. There's no shortage of people to do that. Kundera said that any novel is a place where judgment is suspended, which doesn't mean that we don't feel the moral repercussions of what the characters in a certain novel do, but it's not for the author to tell the reader that this is what's happening. Our job is to trap life in the amber of the page and to solidify it so that we can all experience even the worst that humans are capable of from a safe distance and empathize with it sufficiently before we become the evil ones, because each of us carries both possibilities. This is why what I believe in, and I think this is what the characters in my book hopefully show, is that even the most evil acts come from a good place, a place of wanting to protect, to control, to organize the world in the way that we believe that the world should be organized. When you hear people talk, regardless of the country, regardless of the leaders who are now in charge of our world, unfortunately, when you hear them talk, they come from this good place. They come here to save us. And literature really helps understand how that evil can turn into good, how that good can turn into evil. And I think that's very important. And this is what I try to work with a little bit when I can.
And sometimes, Marta, and you wrote about that in your novel, sometimes people don't even realize they are doing horrible things to other people. Your book, you have three main characters in the book, Nada Mais Ilusório, and one is a female and two males, an older male, an older man, he is a writer, and a younger that maybe, I think, is his student. And I'm telling this just to make some context so that people can understand. And this teacher, writer, had a new book that was a huge success. And he's dealing with this dilemma. He doesn't know if the success is caused because it's a wonderful book or because it's based or motivated a scandal. What I think he doesn't realize is that he have done a lot of harm to people, and he even don't realize that.
Yes. I think I've always been drawn. I mean, this is something I don't know if you will agree with, that it's true what they say, that a writer writes what they what they like to read, something similar to the things they like to read, right? Like what you're drawn to. And I think I've always been drawn to stories where there's no black or white. There's no someone who's pure evil or pure goodness, right? Instead, everyone is flawed, and everyone walks that line between what I should do and what's good for me and what's good for you, and where I stand, not wanting to seem very selfish, but also acting selfishly because I'm human and I'm acting in my own interest, and that's something that happens with the relationships of those three characters, right? Everyone feels when the novel begins, which is on a train where they meet at night, and the three of them are traveling together from London to Edinburgh. They have nothing to do. They have no phones. It's a different time, I guess, and they don't have a book, so they start to talk. And they start to tell each other stories, and throughout that night, their perception of each other changes because they realize the one who had positioned themselves in the place of the victim maybe is not so much because he or she also did something to someone. But they didn't always realize that. And I've always been fascinated by the capacity of human beings to hurt each other, often without meaning to do so, without wanting to do so, especially with the people that we're closer to. They're the ones who have the biggest capacity to hurt us. So that was interesting in the novel for me because these three people are strangers. In theory, they can't really hurt each other. They just met on a train. The professor and the student know each other, but they don't know the woman who they bump into. And they start telling each other the stories, and we then get to know what the novel is, the novel that this professor wrote, and how that affected the life of a real person, real in the book. Not like when I say real, people are like, oh, so he exists. I'm not real in that amber of the book. He doesn't really exist. But he lived that life thinking, I didn't do anything wrong. Someone told me a story and I wrote a book about it, and I'm a writer. And this is just what happened to this person afterwards. But then he gets to, that story becomes his story because it affects him. And that's the story really about the three of them. They didn't mean to, but their lives become intertwined by that long night and what they tell each other, and what they don't tell each other, because obviously every time we talk, we're concealing something and we're keeping something for ourselves.
So that's, in a way, memory is also, like we said, unstable and dynamic, right?
Exactly.
So
exactly.
In a way, that's what Marta showed us. And also Luisa, she made a lot of research to write this novel. And in this novel, she showed us maybe a different Germany that we are that we think that we know. It's not placed right now in the 21st century. It's a very peculiar time in the history of the 20th century. But you made a lot of research. You read a lot just to give that impression that you had of something that we generally think maybe a dark place, and you try to show us other sides.
Exactly because of what Marta was saying, is that I also don't like to tell people this is the bad guy and this is the good guy. I think that happens when you're a child and you really need to know. Like my kids ask me, okay, so that's the bad one, right? Yeah. So they need to know because they need to organize their thoughts. And okay, that's the bad one. And usually they do it so it's very obvious who's the bad one. Usually has like a really big nose and so like really ugly. So it's this one is the bad one. But real life is not like that. And it's one thing, like Marta was saying, we all have this both sides. And also as a reader, like she was saying, I also write what I like to read. And as a reader, I love when I kind of like a character that I think that I shouldn't like. I love when that happens because then it makes me question myself and my values. And I'm like, why am I liking this guy? What's wrong? Who am I? guy, and that's very interesting because we go through this journey, and we're like, wait, but he's doing bad things. I love when people tell me that about my book. So there's this bad guy, but I wanted people to know him through love letters, because like that. Because bad guys also fall in love, you know, and they have good feelings when they fall in love, and that's the interesting thing. So I love when people tell me, but his letters are so nice, then I feel bad that I kind of like him, and I'm like, yeah, I did it. That's what I wanted to do. Because life is like that. No one is just bad or just good, and if you are just bad, it's usually because you're a sociopath. So then that's a different thing. But that's the interesting thing, is for you to make the reader feel things and ask himself that. Why am I feeling this? Why am I liking this guy? Why am I not liking this guy? And as a reader, I love books that make me do that. So that's why I researched, because this is, I'm talking about Eastern Germany when there was the Berlin Wall. And I read this book written by a lady that lived there on the other side of the wall. It's actually called The Other Side of the Wall, because she said that every time that people spoke about Eastern Germany, they said only bad things about it. And there were really good things about it too. And so I read this book, and I really wanted to show the good. Of course, if we think about it, there's no excuse for closing people, putting a wall and saying you're not leaving. But it's very interesting to show things like in factories. They had libraries in factories. They invested a lot in the arts, in classical music, dancing. They invested a lot in sports. So people had, they were given an apartment, and so there were a lot of things that were actually good, but the ones that were bad were really bad. So, but it's important not to only to say everything was really bad on the other side to the person that is reading, because when you're talking about a historical time, then you also have, then you have a job there to teach the person that is reading something, because you cannot just say things and make them, because some people are going to learn from you. Maybe some are never going to read anything else. And so if they learn from you, you might as well teach them something that is correct and right, you know? So that's why I never wanted to write an historical book. But I ended up in a period where I had to tell the truth, so about the historical part. So then I had to do this research, and that was very interesting, to say the good and the bad about living on the other side. And I learned a lot from it too.
Mm-hmm. Joanna, the main characters of your book are women that are tormented by guilt. They are tormented by guilt, especially because of their backgrounds and their legacy. Also, the clash between the collective memory and their own experience. Does literature help people to reconcile with their background, with their legacy?
Hopefully. It's interesting because literature is, so there's a lot of research that works with our reactance, which means how we react when we hear information that we don't like, something that which does not confirm all the preconceived, notions of the world that we have. And when we watch TV, or when we argue with a friend, or when we hear information from our uncle who's like really weird and is always into these conspiracies, we ultimately...
There's always one.
There's always one. We put this wall up, and there's no way in which this information can penetrate to our core and change the chain of events that we have in our heads. Interestingly enough, when people read books, that reactance is at its lowest level, which means that it is scientifically proven that literature nurtures empathy, which makes sense because, as I said before, we get to experience life in its full capacity if we're lucky and we're reading a very good book written by an honest author, because I think honesty on the page is what breeds a good book, what brings a good book to life. We get to plunge in the deepest, darkest parts of life from the safety of our chair or our bed or our desk or wherever else you're, reading. I'm not going to name any more rooms of the house. So I believe that, yes, I believe literature has the power to change a person, and a person has the power to change a society, and a society has the power to change the world, right? So what's better than that? I don't think there's many other things that can do that sort of magic.
Well, because we are here with three writers that are very passionate by books. Marta also is a professor, and I don't know how to exactly say this, but in your book we noticed that love for literature and that game that you try to play with the reader, but in a way. I don't know, are people saying that writers are the biggest liars? So, how do you manage to balance these sides of the writers that are, in a way, liars, but also having this important task, even when they don't want that task, to make, in a way, not to fix, but to make eternal some memories or some stories.
I love that word, the idea of liars and writers being liars. I remember when Mario Vargas Llosa won the Nobel Prize, since there's so many Nobel Prizes here at the festival this time, he wrote a beautiful speech in Spanish called La Verdad de las Mentiras, right? The truth about lies. And it was about the truths that can be found in literature, the truths that can be found in a story that is completely made up with people that are not real, with things that didn't happen. And it was beautiful because it talked about how, this concept of, with all the things that happen in the world, good and bad, and all kinds of people doing all kinds of things in the history of the world, why do we read about things that never happened? And he asked this question, right? Why do we want to read about a story of something that never actually happened, people that didn't exist? Because it's not a lie. Because it's a lie only in the superficial sense of, sure, someone made them up. But if that person was being honest in the sense of honest with themselves and with human nature, there are real feelings in there, and there are their behaviors and their reactions to people's misgivings and to people's sort of idiosyncrasies that you can get to experience, like Joanna was saying, from the comfort of your chair, and feel with them, and actually be in it, and like a character that you're not supposed to like, because that's how we all are in life too. So I think that's the sort of trick or the loophole about fiction, that you're reading something that you think there's no risk here for me. This didn't happen. It didn't happen to me. So even if I cry, I know it's fake. And even if I'm scared, I know it's not real.
But
there is something real.
But readers always want to find the writer in what they're writing. They always think, oh my God, maybe she had this experience.
Absolutely.
Oh my God, she had a terrible life. This poor character. Oh my God, she had a terrible life.
Yeah, and I think that's the interesting part, that Javier Marias wrote this beautiful essay called La Huella del Animal, the footprint of the animal. And he in the essay he talked about how that's what fiction was, right? If we're in the snow or we're on a beach and we see footprints, we don't see an animal, but the footprint tells us there was an animal there at some point. Who knows when the animal walked by? The animal is gone, and that's only the footprint. And he said that's literature. Even if you didn't live any of that, the fact that you were able to think about it means it happened in some way, and it left this footprint. So it's there. You're there, even if that didn't happen to you. Many readers have asked me, so did that happen to you on a train? Did you find this too? No, that didn't happen to me on a train. But something happened to me in my head that made this happen on the page. So in a way, I think that's the truth about lying.
So we know that Louisa didn't live
No.
near the Berlin Wall.
I look a bit German, but that's all. No, I didn't. But I think it's things are only a lie until you start writing them. Then they become true. Because I know that when I was writing my characters, I really believed in them. And when I was talking about them, I remember when I was writing, I was talking about the characters to my ex-husband. I remember I was like, oh my God, this is gonna happen. He's like, you know that they aren't real, right? And I'm like, no, I don't know. Most of the time, I don't know. And when people talk to me about, for instance, one of the characters, Francesca, then I say, oh, isn't she so nice? Because I kind of believe that she is real. Because I think we have to believe they're real, or no one else is going to believe they're real. So they don't exist until we start writing them. Then they exist, at least for us. And I think mine, they did exist for me. And I suffered a lot. And it was my first experience because I always wrote about, in my music, I wrote about my own life. So it was my first experience writing about other people's lives. And that happened to me. So they were real. And I really do believe that people are not going to believe they're real unless the author believes they're real too.
And I was going to say, if you didn't believe they were real, how could you spend all that time with them? That's what I think.
Exactly.
You have to believe it, because otherwise you would be with your kids, with your real friends, and instead you're with these people. It's madness.
No, it's really madness, because I kind of
believe it.
Yeah, I felt like I was going to bed with all of them.
Yeah.
And waking up with all of them.
Yeah.
A lot of people in my life, because I already have 4 kids, so a lot of people in my bed in the morning. But so I do believe that we have to believe. I tell that to kids a lot because there's this age where children, they don't believe in anything anymore. So, and it's very interesting. One of my children's books, they are like, there's something scary in the closet. And so they start saying, okay, but what if there's not a monster in the closet? What if there are things that happen in the closet, but it's like they're magical. So that happens. And at the end, the child says, oh, don't close the doors of the closet because I saw a parrot and whatever. So it's a thing of the child starting to believe again. And I do believe there's an age where kids don't want to believe in anything anymore because they're too grown up. And I tell them that we adults that write, we believe in things that we don't see. So it's not a childish thing to believe in things that we don't see. It's, it's faith also. But it's also a thing that you can do as a grown-up. So I tell them it's not childish if you believe in things. I also believe in things that I cannot see.
So Louisa also believes in Santa Claus, and right?
And yeah, but he hasn't. I don't have any. He doesn't bring me anything. I don't know why. I believe in him and nothing.
Joanna, I believe that readers often come to you and say, "Oh my God," because one of the main characters of her book has a lot of similarities with your life. So I believe that readers always or almost always make this confusion and try to find Joanna in your characters. How do you deal with this?
I lie. I'm just kidding. It's very interesting in her 2018-2019 speech after she won the Nobel Prize. Olga Tokarczuk talked a lot about this sort of like autobiographical fiction that's hyper-realist. And that need for the reader to know what is true and what isn't in a work of art, and our own need to only read books that we can identify with, relate to. And she spoke of it as something that's very dangerous to the art of writing, and I believe she's right. Now, I happen to write a very realist novel that has a lot of similarities and uses real historical artifacts. But I actually believe that regardless if you write sci-fi, or if you write autofiction, or if you write fairy tales, the author is all of these things. The author is every blade of grass that's in the book. The author is a weird planet with weird creatures on it, because everything you work on the page is some part of you that you're trying to organize, some way you're trying to experience yourself, your life, to organize this chaos that we all inhabit. The difference, I believe, between autobiography and a work of literature is that you don't put everything in a work of art. You select, you organize, you choose language, you choose a plot, you lie, you create conversations that didn't happen, you attribute to your characters qualities that they perhaps don't have if they exist as prototypes in real life. And I think that's very important, and perhaps subconsciously in my own work, I've tried to resist this sort of hyper-realism that comes also from the US and the sort of MFA writers workshop, literature that is very popular right now, and that creates this sort of Instagram, social media-like image of myself. So if I'm a white woman that has these other qualities, I'm going to only read books that cater to that. And it's very dangerous, because that takes a lot of the empathy from, literature. Because if we don't care about anybody who's not like us, where does that leave us in our own bubble? So this is how I handle it. Sometimes when people ask me, what part of it is real? I say about 62%, completely, randomly make up a number in my head. Sometimes I say all of it, sometimes I say none of it, but I believe it's a writer's choice and a writer's obligation to not reveal and to just be faithful to the art until the very end. And then maybe after they die, people can start picking and, asking what's real and what's not.
Can I ask something?
Yes, of course.
But did you do it on purpose? So you knew that the character was a little similar to you, and you did it on purpose to mess up with the reader's head and be like, is this me or is it me? Did you kind of do it a little?
This is the great thing about your first book, is that you don't care about the reader, because you don't even believe that they exist.
There will be a reader,
right?
I know.
As Jorge Luis Borges says about his first book, he actually said that he's going to write a personal note to all the 20 people who purchased it to say, I'm sorry. So you don't really think about the reader at that point. Okay. I think you just write the book you want to read. You try to organize the world in your own way on the page, and to discover something about yourself. It's a very selfish act, and I think really good authors keep that for life, because the readers know when you cater to him. The reader knows when you're trying to lie to him or trying to teach him something. The readers know. The reader knows when you're not honest, and I think that hurts a book, any art, quite a bit. So fingers crossed we keep that, right?
So I'm going to defy you to make some questions to our guests, to our writers. But before that, I have to ask, because, well, Joanna said that, and I have to ask you. So what have you learned when you finished your book, Marta?
I don't know. I don't know exactly. What did I learn? I feel like Rosa Montero, who is a writer, well, everyone knows Rosa Montero in Spain.
And here in Portugal
and
also.
Here in Portugal as well. And she always says, hopefully when you finish a book, you don't know exactly what you learned, but you feel like you learned something about yourself. And I was like, oh, it's very abstract. I'm sure you can pinpoint at it a bit more concretely. But no, I don't know. I don't know exactly what I learned, but I feel like after that there was there was some wisdom within me that wasn't there before, and that certainly it taught me something about the way I see the world or the way I want to believe in human relations, that I wasn't trying to teach the readers, because I agree with that. Like, I always say this to my students when they're like, what is the book trying to teach us? I'm like, no, the book is not, I as a teacher may try to teach you something, but the books, they don't try to teach us. They're there, and we hopefully learn from them, but each to their own, you know, without a moral of like the good and the evil and all of that. So I feel like it taught me something, but I couldn't really say what.
You know what?
Yeah.
Luisa.
I learned that I can write a book. I guess that's it.
It's good. It's
yeah,
good.
then it was amazing because I never thought that I could write a book. So I think, well, a children's book I've written, but like a novel. So I'm just glad I did from the beginning to the end, and I'm happy with that.
Joanna?
I don't think I learned much. I do think I became less lonely. We tend to live in the isolation of our own minds for most of the time, if we're human. And then somebody comes up to you and says, you know, I had a grandma who did exactly the same thing as that grandma does. Or one time I was, you know, like looking at the sky and I had the exact same, it's, you know, experience. And it's sort of relieving to know we're not as unique and as tortured as we think we are. It's kind of a great experience to go with a Bulgarian book to Portugal or to Norway, and talk about how we all feel that we live in a periphery when it comes to Europe, to talk about dictatorships, to talk about, you know, like revolutions, to talk about how we experience history, the small and the, you know, large history that we're all comprised of. And this is what books teach us, that we're boringly, calmingly the same. And I love that about books. Yeah.
And now I pass the ball to you, so questions? No one. Oh my God, come on. No one.
If you don't ask us questions, we're going to ask you questions, and they're going to be hard.
Nothing. Oh my God.
Podem perguntar em português, está tudo bem.
Exato, sim.
E depois traduz-se.
Não há ninguém corajoso. But não há there is no doubt. There is no doubt. One last question. It's the question that all the writers like to answer. So, what are you working now?
First, I talked about this earlier this morning, that because of the publication dates, the way the publishing world works is that by the time your book is out, you finished writing it a while ago, which is great because then when you get to present it, you relive it, you go back to a story that you were with, characters that you were with maybe a year ago. So my second novel is actually coming out in January, and it will be now I'm at the time of making revisions and like finding words that I've used too much and like finding all the flaws in the characters, like, you know, the little things that at that stage you feel like everything is wrong with the book, because that's what you're doing at the end with those revisions, realizing that you made the characters smile too much, shrug their shoulders too much. Like this shrugging of the shoulders, my editor, my Spanish editor, said, they shrug their shoulders too much. And I searched and I was like, yeah, they do. Why do they do? I don't think I do it that much, but you know. So I'm at that stage of torture of like revising my second novel, but it's exciting because it's coming out soon.
Okay, Luisa?
I started writing my second novel before this one came out, but my editor doesn't let me release it because it's too soon. No, it's kind of true, but I'm still working on it. But it's good because I have plenty of time. This one came out in April, so it would be too soon anyway. But I do have a lot of time to just work on it more peacefully, because the first one I was a little stressed. The process was very stressful because I write songs very fast, and you cannot write a novel that fast. So that made me a little anxious. But now I'm not anxious with the process anymore. Oh, that's what it taught me also. It taught me not to be anxious in long processes, like writing a book. So this one, I'm taking my time. Sometimes I'm also doing what my editor told me, that sometimes you just leave it there and let it sit for a while and then go back to it. And so I'm letting it sit for a long time. And it's like wine. So that's what I'm working on.
Joanna?
I've become rather interested in the question of what happens to the book in the age of social media. What happens to a linear narrative in the age when none of us exist in one place in one time. I see a lot of you are existing in other places, in other timelines right now. And that experience of reality, how do you translate it in a book, is a question that I've been going over my head again and again and again. I've been reading a lot of wacky, kooky books that help me sort of get an idea. And I'm working on something very different, perhaps very strange, but something which I really believe in. And I'm actually going to read from it in The Hague next month to see if people are going to say, what the, or actually have some confidence inspired into me that I'm not getting too big for my own plans, and yeah.
Last chance, people. Oh, we have one question. We have one courageous. Espera só um bocadinho, vão levar-lhe o microfone. Pode fazer em português, não há problema.
Sempre me pergunto, o escritor também é um grande leitor, e quando escreve ficção, se não terá alguma falha entre memória, de ter já lido essa história, ou imaginação. Não estar a escrever a história de outro. ¿Se puede repetir en español si quieres?
Que ya leíste en una historia que ya leíste, si no te da miedo de escribir las mismas cosas que ya has leído, pero no te acuerdas.
Se su memoria no le arme una armadilla y le pregue una partida y esté escribiendo la historia de otro.
Sí. Yo creo que a veces a mí me ha ocurrido sorry, I switched to Spanish. Sorry.
Change the channel.
Sorry, yes. Switch. It's happened to me that I have read something that I wrote a long time before, but not fiction, so like academic work, and I think, did I write that? I thought I read that from someone else. So that confusion has happened to me, but not to the point of actually writing a story that is something that, that I've already read something somewhere else. But yes, to the part of sometimes with maybe like a metaphor or, a phrase, something that you use. This happened to me with the phrase, los ojos de la mente, like the eyes of the mind, for a little phrase of something that you remember. She was looking at that with the eyes of the mind. It sounds a bit better in Spanish, con los ojos de la mente. And it's in my first, I don't know how they will have translated it in Portuguese, but it's in my first novel, same, Los Ojos de la Mente.
Os olhos da mente, acho que sim, provavelmente.
Okay. So then a friend of mine who's also an academic, she sent me an essay that she wrote that I asked her for, and I saw it there. And I was like, wait, you used this? And I said, you used this before me. I used this because of you. And I didn't even give you credit. And she said, no. But I use it because Eli de Pitarello, who's an academic that works on Javier Marias, uses it. And then I asked her, and she said, this is Javier Marias. And so everyone was using, you know, it's like this
It's almost an expression now.
yes, almost an expression. It's unintended, but we all used it. So in my next novel, I used it again, and then I was like, oh, it's here. Now I must give credit. So at the end, I wrote all those people, that line of people, because I didn't want to presume it was mine. It wasn't mine, but I forgot that it wasn't mine. And it's a thing that I thought was rather beautiful, but it wasn't mine. I used it after a line of people. So it's true that it gets a little muddled talking about memory, right? That like what you read and what you make up become a bit one.
I think with music that happens a lot because it's different. Here it's a whole story, so it's very hard for you to be writing the exact same story and not notice. Yeah. But with music that happens a lot. But to me, it happens a lot that I'm writing something and I'm like, I heard this somewhere, and then I go and it's one of my songs from like back then. So at least I'm not going to sue myself. So I'm fine. But I do have a song that starts exactly like a song that Aerosmith wrote. And I don't even like Aerosmith, but the song, and then only when I released it, I was like, oh, it's exactly the same in the beginning. And so there's a lot of things like that. But I do think that if you get caught up in that, if you think about it too much, then you're not gonna do anything because it's too stressful. We all gonna steal things from someone. We're gonna steal like small sentences. We're gonna steal ideas, and that's how art works. You just go, because we are all the time reading things, looking at things, and we're just gonna steal. But what we do is it's like a collage. We reorganize what we stole and what we like, and we make it into our own. But you cannot stress about that. Usually, students of songwriting, they ask me that a lot, and I tell them, you cannot think about it, or you're not going to write ever, because everything will sound like something else that you've heard before. And if you start freaking out about it, then you're not going to write. So you might as well do it, and then you get sued after, and that's how it works.
Okay.
And then you deal with it later.
Joanna?
I'm going to quote Borges again. He said that there's 6 plots in the world, in the entire history of humankind. You know, somebody is in love, somebody dies, somebody leaves, you know, right? And so on and so forth. I am haunted every day by the feeling that everything good has already been written. There's nothing good we can come up with, right? But the reality is that you take those 6 plots and you give them your own voice, which is why I'm very interested in the organization of a text and how you choose to organize time in the text. I was talking to my lovely publisher earlier who told me that they had to request the Romanian translation of my book in order to organize the paragraphs exactly in the way I've put them. I am so sorry. But every comma can have a purpose, can have a meaning, and this is your own voice in the way you organize your own text. And I think this is the beauty of it, right? We're always going to rehash the same plots. From ancient literature, see, I'm right. He agrees. From ancient literature all the way to nowadays, we're always going to be writing about the same, issues. But how we do it is increasingly of interest to me. And I think great writing sort of deals with that, not just with telling something that happened, but how we tell that and why we choose to tell it in this exact way. I wish I was as prolific and as experienced and as brilliant as these 2 women, but I'm not. So I get to not cheat and look at what I've done before for now. But I'm sure that even if I come up with something truly great, somebody's already done it. And that's the beauty of literature, right? And all art.
So wrapping up, I think that we can say that the main lesson we learned here today after this conversation is be careful when you are around writers because they're dangerous. Don't trust them. Well, thank you so much, Joanna Elmi, Luísa Sobral, Marta Pérez Carbonell. e apenas dizer que as autoras estão disponíveis para autografar os seus livros. Obrigada, boa tarde.